Hello, everyone. Hi, how are you? Welcome to our very first book stream. I see Raj backstage. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Hi, how are you? Welcome to our very first book stream. I see Raj backstage. Hello. Hello, everyone.
I hear an echo.
How are you? Welcome to our very first I see Raj backstage. Hello, everyone. I hear an echo.
We're getting
Should we close YouTube and just go through Streamlabs or what?
Well, if you sorry, we'll do it that way. Yeah, because I think it's you. If you mute YouTube, you can still have it open on the side. But then you can still see the chat, but you won't hear the audio. If that makes sense. But then you can still see the chat, but you won't hear the audio. If that makes sense.
Interesting.
Oh no, he ran away. Hello, Cybot.
Good evening, everyone.
And I know I could call you Tobias, but we're gonna stick with Cybot. How are you doing?
I am currently turning into a puddle upon the floor.
Isn't everybody? Yes, we're working on the echo. Raj is taking care of it right now, but I'm really excited. I'm so glad I got to see him on camera, and I am really excited to get to talk about this. So, okay, no worries, Raj. Hey, you know what? You take as much time as you need. I'm in. No, hold on. Let me see. There we go. Why did that? Oh, because it's a. Hold on. It's not gonna let me show your comment, Raj, but you're working on. Okay, there you are, Raj. Hello.
Hello.
Much better. So,
Wonder if it's my cam.
Okay, there you are, Raj. Hello. Oh, no, we still have an echo with you. Do you have a headset? Because I think we're hearing your speakers through your mic, is what I think might be happening. So if you have a headset and you can put it on, then that should take care of it. Because otherwise you won't be able to hear us, and that would not be good. Or you can mute and unmute when you want to talk, if that's how you want to do it too.
Yeah.
There's that opportunity.
Or maybe you did what I did last time and you had both StreamYards and YouTube open. Maybe
Possibly, yeah, that could do it too. But yes, so
Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just shut down YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go. So before we get into anything super crazy, I'm really excited to have you both here talking about it, and chat. I'm really excited for it too, so that we get to talk about it. If you guys aren't part of the Grave Master level, don't worry. You're still we're gonna be looking at the chat. I'm trying to figure out why it won't let me I don't know. Maybe because I guess I have it marked private, so I can't show comments, which is bizarre to me. Let me try and let's do unlisted. And then maybe I can. There we go. Okay. Yeah, an echo of an echo, Chris Persia. No worries. So, Andrew, I'm so glad that you guys finally. I heard the UK was actually having quite the heat wave, so I'm glad. I'm glad you were able to break through it. I know thunderstorms, they're wonderful when they roll through. So hello everyone in chat. Your comments, we'll highlight them on the screen and we'll talk about them a little bit. But of course, since Saiba and Raj are both Gravemaster, we're going to get to talk one-on-one about the book. So before we get into any of the details, before we get into any of the classic lines that everybody seems to know, but apparently many don't realize it comes from the story, Raj, since you were here first, what is your overall impression of the A Tale of Two Cities?
I'm sorry to say, though, I found it a lot more difficult to read than I did the first time, which is over 40 years ago.
Oh no!
Yeah, I seemed to understand it better when I was in high school, maybe because I was younger. I don't know. But I found the writing to be very descriptive, maybe
Mm.
deceptively descriptive. I had to reread stuff. Like I
Yes.
took a month to read this, and I had to reread paragraphs over and over just to figure out what exactly was Dickens saying. But it's very, I found it very flowery language. I found it very descriptive and very much a product of the times in which
Mhm.
not only Dickens wrote it, but also a product of the times about which he wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was a great story. It's uh, you know almost it's a combination of Les Mis and best James Bond
That
movie.
that's fair. Okay, that's a real. I've actually never heard. I've heard it compared to Les Mis, mostly because of La Revolution and all of that other stuff. And
Oh, another one would be
it is a
Man
new
in the
one.
Iron
I've never
Mask.
heard that one.
Man in
Yes,
the
Very
Iron
Man in the Iron
Mask.
Man.
Yeah.
Yes, that one I have heard too. But okay, well, I'm glad. But did you? So you enjoyed this story. So I hope you don't feel like it was a waste of time, right?
Oh, absolutely not. It
Okay.
just took me a while, a longer while than in high school to wrap my head around it.
Okay, not a problem. And I mean, that's like this is a pretty for a lot of people, especially if reading is not something that you have made a habit of lately, or it's something that you fell out of the habit of, or you're used to shorter stories that have a lot less density to it. This could be a tough read, for sure. Just like you said, to reread it, because Dickens. I mean, even if you read the Christmas Carol, it's the same thing. Very descriptive. It's very flowery language, and his the way that Dickens writes, um, he's very like world building was not a thing back when he wrote. That's not what it was called. It was it was descriptive and it was immersive and it was these other things, but the term world building didn't exist. But that is exactly what he was doing. You're very much you can see the scene because he has literally painted it for you in black and white. So okay. Well, thank you for that, Raj. Saibot, what did you think of the story?
I agree with what Raj said. Overall, I like it because I mean it's Charles Dickens, so obviously that comes with a certain standard by itself. Um, as I mentioned during our first kind of setup meeting, I had actually not read this one before. I have
Yeah.
only read one. I have read two Dickens books, Christmas Carol and Oliver Twist.
Oliver Twist.
For some reason,
Yes.
this one was a bit like Raj said. For some reason, this one was a bit harder to get through, and maybe it's because I'm an idiot or something. But I too had to stop and reread a couple of times because I do think that while his writing is not necessarily self-indulgent, sometimes he does get kind of carried away a bit with the descriptions, which is good. I'm not carried away to the point where it ruins it, but it's just he gets very into it. I think.
Yes. It's one of the things that he is
When he
very
gets
well
to a
known.
scene, when he gets to a scene that you can feel that he really wants to drive home, he really wants you to feel what's happening. It reminds me of a guitarist on stage really getting into a particular set, and he just goes hard on his instrument, and he just gets really into it, and maybe doesn't necessarily realize the sheer amount of noise he's making. That's kind of the analogy I think of. But yes, overall, very good. Like I said, it's interesting with the world building because again, maybe we associate world building more with fictional worlds, whereas he was dealing with a historic event.
Yeah.
So maybe it is expected people to be, people knew what would happen or what was happening. He kind of expected them to have some familiarity with it, perhaps.
I think that's fair for sure. So we will start out with what is probably one of the most quoted and best known lines in all of literature, and apparently a lot of people don't know that it comes from this book, but A Tale of Two Cities is the story that starts out. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going directly to heaven, and we were all going direct the other way. So, yeah, that's the intro to A Tale of Two Cities, and that sort of sets up where this whole story is actually going, because you have throughout the first third of this book, it's really stuff that's like leading up to like there's all of these incidents that are happening, and you have the French rabble, the French peasants, who are, of course, I mean, they've pretty much had it with the aristocracy, but we are not quite at the revolution just yet. So this story starts in 1775. So we are a year before the American Revolution. And the story itself is fictitious, but it is placed in events leading up to and through the French Revolution. And I think what this story does really well, so this is a historical fiction novel. And I really like that Raj compared this to James Bond, because there is a lot of spying and treachery that goes on in this book. And I think, especially with, I don't want to say like lack of attention span, because I'm not saying that either of you have lack of attention span at all. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that we have, like, part of the reason that I picked this book out, yeah, I know, right? I'm not saying that anybody here has lack of attention or anything like that. But what I am saying is that it's and I think you guys would agree with me, we have definitely gotten to a point in culture, in society, where we expect a 90-minute to 2-hour movie, we consume it, and then we regurgitate a couple things that were like the moments, and then we like forget the rest of the story and we move on to the next thing, right? That's kind of where we're at. You can't do that with this story. You simply can't. It's this book, if you honestly, if you're not able to like read this book within like 4 days, it actually makes it really hard, because you're gonna be like, oh wait, why was this instance so important? Let me go back and remember that reference. Because what this book does, it challenges the reader to recall these little details. And as you both have pointed out, Charles Dickens, he did not care about the rule of, if you can say something in 2 words instead of 5, do it. Dickens is very much, if you can say it in 2 words, that's fine. I'm going to go say it in 10.
Yeah, he did 15.
Yeah, that's Dickens. He is very, he's very free flowing with his pen. But the thing is, the difference between his work and someone else's who is less skilled of a writer, I think you can both agree, Dickinson's work, it never loses focus. It's not like he goes off on these random tangents in these sort of expositions, and it has nothing to do with the story, or it makes the story less tight. Yeah.
There's very little, if any, of this that you can read that you would be able to cut out and not have it be relevant. I absolutely agree with that.
Yes. And I think there is actually an abridged version of this on like Audible or something. And I have no idea how they abridged this version or abridged this story, because I can honestly not think of anything that's not important. Like, one of the best scenes for me in the very beginning of the book is when the wine barrel shatters.
Yes.
Well, it's basically foreshadowing blood in the streets, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's, it's red wine. And then, of course, you have the French citizen who writes blood on the wall, but he writes it in wine. And that's the amount of, I mean, Dickens Dickens tells you the exact story you are about to embark on, and you still want to find out like the details of it. This story is so incredibly well done that way.
I
Hang
was
on a
actually going to
second.
mention. Yeah. Go
Oh,
on.
sorry. I just saw Calgy.
Ooh.
Are you kidding or are you serious?
Yeah, so now everyone understands the Wrath of Khan better because that was the book that Spock handed to Kirk on his birthday.
Yeah. I can't. Calgy, you got to help us out here. Are you being truthful? Because, like, I know a lot of people don't know that quote came from this book, but yeah, like, yeah, Chris Persia, exactly. Like, did you really not know, Calgy? Because, like, I mean, first of all, I'm grateful that we were able to like get you to the realization that this came from this book. But there's something. Okay, so normally I don't do this, but this isn't with these book clubs. They're not going to be super structured. We're very much just trying to discuss the book. It's not like we're going to go chapter by chapter because one, I find that somewhat dull, and two, I think it cheats. It like almost insults your guys' intelligence because you are capable of reading this book or any of the books. You know what I mean? But I will. Do you guys, Raj or Saibot? Can you quote the last line of the book, or from memory at all, or do you know what line I'm referring to? Because I think when I say it, Calgy, I'll probably blow your mind again. If you didn't know about the intro, I think the last line of this book will probably throw you too. So it's the last line of this book is, "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done.
All right.
It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." Yes, Andrew Hoyle. Ah, yes, I saw that. Cal, you're serious. Okay, so yes, Andrew Hoyle, yes. So we get both. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and it is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. Cal G, oh my goodness, this is fantastic. Actually, I'm so happy that we get to explore this with you for the first time. I really hope you go read the book. It is very good. If you need, I'm not saying you need help reading it, but like if audio helps you, there is an audiobook of this, which is really well done. But yeah, so
Yeah, I listened to it in audiobook.
yeah, there you go. So
Yeah.
I don't know, you two, I mean, Raj, Saiba, I'm assuming you two have heard those lines before. Right.
Well,
Yes, and for those Trekkies again, I mean, Admiral Kirk says it at the end of Wrath of Khan as well. So that's
Mhm.
my take on it.
There you go.
well, remember, Lady G, when we had the first meeting, I did not know that either. You have to tell me that.
I did have to tell you that. That's right.
And I don't think either I or Cal G should feel too ashamed because you
No.
yourself pointed out that this has been it's been quoted so much that
Yes.
the actual original source can be difficult to pinpoint.
Yeah.
Yes, it's this is sort of why I started with this book. I mean, it is a standalone novel. It's an exceptionally well written. It's Charles frickin' Dickens. Like, I'm not about to sit here and be like, "Oh, Charles Dickens didn't know what he was doing." Yeah, okay. No, he clearly knew what he was doing, but his style was so unique compared to even Mark Twain, who at the time of Mark Twain's writing was considered, flowery and less masculine than, say, the other novelists, his fellow authors, his fellow writers. I won't say mocked him, but the comment was made that his use of the language was more liberal and more feminine than they were accustomed to writing with. And I go back and read Mark Twain now, and I'm like, damn, like, if this was feminine then, I shudder to think what they would think about writing now. Holy goodness. But I read this book in 6th grade because I had read Great Expectations and The Lord of the Rings in 5th grade. And this is an incredible story, and I'm so glad, Cal G. No, I mean, you know what? I wish you had gotten a chance to read this when you were younger, because I think, as Raj said, it's really easier to sort of grasp some of these concepts when you're younger, especially if you're being forced to read it. I hate to use that terminology, but if you're being forced to read it for a grade, more people are like, you're more likely to pick it up. You know what I mean? I don't know anybody who picks up Moby Dick for pleasure anymore. You know, it's not like, oh, that's my weekend read. Like, that doesn't happen. It's sad to say, but
we're so conditioned to consume product and then consume
Yeah.
that product
yes.
within the space of like between 45 and 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That we can't handle anything longer than that. And we used to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually about to say the exact same thing, basically, that you pointed out earlier, Lady G, that a lot of people wouldn't, quote unquote, cannot handle this type of literature anymore. It's because, you cannot read this the same way you would read a comic book, for example. It's a work that is supposed to inspire you to think.
Yep.
And so you need to take time with it. And it's because it came out before consumer culture.
Yep.
Like I said, like I have students today whose attention span is so terrifyingly short that when I tell them, okay, no class today, we're just gonna watch a movie instead, which is something that most students would be like rejoicing over. They're like, does it have to be an hour and 20 minutes long? Like that's too long. And I'm like, are you guys incapable of watching a movie? Like that's weird.
Well, your students, I'm sure you have a lot of Gen Z and Gen Alpha in your class.
Yes.
And they're accustomed now to. We went from 2 or 3 hour plays and productions on stage to 2 to 3. So plays could be anywhere from like 2 to 5 hours, and then when cinema came about in the 1900s, we had moving pictures, and at first they were short because there was only so much you could do with the moving picture until it developed further. And then when we got film, films would be anywhere from 150 minutes to like 207 minutes. But then those got cut down to 2 hours, and then those got cut down to 90 minutes. And now Gen Z and Gen Alpha are so accustomed to 30 seconds to 1 minute TikToks.
Yeah.
That like it's not surprising that none of them would consider picking this book up, quite frankly, unless they were conditioned. Like, it's not even that you can't read it, it's that they are not conditioned for something this heavy of a read.
Indeed.
And
actually, just gonna get back to the book. I actually tried to be a good reader and take some notes while listening to the book. I took some quotes and some things I wanted to bring up. I didn't manage to get down everything I wanted because time became a factor. But speaking of that famous kind of intro line and really what the whole first chapter talks about, I wrote this. I said, I quoted, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of time," yada yada, that full line. And then I said kind of what I thought that it represented or what it implied. And it was kind of a time where, very horrible things, talking about the French Revolution here, a time where horrible things were done in the name of bringing about change and a supposedly better future. It can also be like this introductory quote can also be seen as a representation of the views of those involved. Some saw the revolution as the gates of a utopia being thrown open into a bright new world, while others saw it as anarchy bringing down one of Europe's foremost societies. So for some, it was the best of time, and for some, it was the worst of times.
It was, yeah.
Some of them had a guillotine in the future. So.
Yeah, it was definitely the king and queen being among those. I mean, this was indeed a tragedy for a lot of people.
The French government is so, conscious of large-scale demonstrations going on in their country because everything harkens back to this major event, the French Revolution, and everything associated with, the people toppling the government, that they allow things to happen a lot of times. There's not a lot of, water, guns, tear gas, or anything like that, just because they don't want. These people weren't around when that happened, but I guess there's just such a national fear of that they ain't going near it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've gone. Aren't they on like their 5th republic at present? So
Yeah.
Something.
they have gotten into a bit of a cycle for sure.
Hmm.
And yeah, I just really like the whole first chapter when it kind of it doesn't actually talk about characters in the first chapter. It just describes the
No.
mood of these
Yes.
of England and France, and
Yes.
it really does a good job of setting up just how tense everything is. Like
Mhm.
it talks about highwaymen and robberies and burglary is just a commonly accepted thing. Shootouts between protesters. They wouldn't
Yep.
call them protesters probably, but
No.
demonstrators and
Revolutionaries.
soldiers. Yeah, kind of proto-revolutionaries, because that's still in 1775, like you said.
Yeah.
So-
Traitors at this point. Yeah, when it starts, they would be considered traitors to
Yeah.
the aristocracy and to France.
Yeah, and I cannot quote the line specifically, but specifically talking about the shootouts that would happen. It said something like protesters and musketeers would shoot each other, and this was not seen as out of the ordinary. Like this was just commonly occurring.
The mob, I think.
And then something like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then and then the musketeers would turn around and do like equally criminal stuff, and it was just like a weird cycle. So.
And that's. Oh, go ahead, Raj.
I'm sorry. I found there to be a lot of the ends justify the means going on.
Absolutely.
In this book, on both sides. Obviously on the aristocracy side, but definitely on the revolutionary side, because they were doing equally atrocious things in the name of revolution against the people who had done those atrocious things to them over the years. So,
Oh yeah.
You become who you hate, I guess.
Yep. And
Absolutely.
the thing
like
is,
this whole
go ahead.
yeah, like this whole book just is saturated with the idea that it doesn't really it doesn't glorify either side. You on the one hand, you have a detached aristocracy who does not understand the plight of the people. You have a people who have indeed suffered and been oppressed for a long time. They don't know what to do, and they are just. The thing with the revolutionaries here is that they are definitely not portrayed in good light, but there's also this weird animalistic scramble for that perfect solution to their problems, that they're willing to just engage in all kinds of horrible acts. Execute enough people, expose enough traitors to the revolution, bring about, be the most patriotic, be the most Republican, be the most anti-aristocracy, and you will find the utopia, right? Topple the church, throw out the kings, bring about the cult of enlightenment. It's something more and more extreme all the time, and we will have what we want. And what you have is just a bunch of kind of blood in the street in the end. It's really scary to watch.
See what that cold, resentment and hatred does to people. I mean, look at the scarf thing. I mean, that's just straight up cold-blooded. I'm adding you to the list.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when it came to the mob fever was depicted very well in this story, because you had people who normally would be. This is why I always say you can't trust someone who claims to be a pacifist or claims to be peaceful, because a lot of these people had never lifted a finger. They'd been beaten their whole lives. They were beaten, they were broken, they were bludgeoned, and not even physically, just like spiritually. They were, emotionally, spiritually, they had no morale. And then it was enough to have one, like in this story in particular, like I said, it's a fictitious, the story itself is fictitious, but it happens during real historical events. And sort of like what Raj was saying with the scarf, the fact that, you can condemn someone to death by guillotine simply because you denounce them. There's a lot of denouncing in this story. And one of the main characters, who actually the story, what's nice about this story is it doesn't necessarily revolve around any one character too much. It's really more the actions of these characters that the story revolves around. And the good doctor, who was wrongfully imprisoned for 16 years because of the aristocracy. And we'll tell you guys what exactly the charge was in a little bit. But there was someone in the aristocracy who had him thrown in prison in the Bastille for 16 years. He was in solitary confinement for 16 years. The man's mind was broken.
Wasn't it 18 years?
Was it 18? I swear it said 16.
Yeah, I think you're right, Sidebot.
It was 18.
Yeah.
Why did I write down 16? Or I just can't read my own handwriting. That works too. That might be an 8.
Right.
Get it right. I know. I have my notes. And I can't read my own writing. Yeah. Okay. So it's even worse. 18 years and he's in solitary confinement. I mean, that's beyond cruel and unusual punishment. And when he's set free, do you guys remember what he says when they ask for his name?
105 North Tower.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's depressing.
That is. He comes in and he's like, can you tell, Mr. Laurie, can you tell me your name? My name? 105 North Tower. Like, I just hear it that way, like just hollow. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Someone whose soul died in that cell.
It's basically, my name is Gladiator. Same thing. It's like your name.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like 105 North Tower. I think, honestly, of all, like, the intro and that, like, those lines that we were talking about that are some of the most well-known and most quoted lines in literature. And I, honest to God, believe that when Manette calls himself, so Dr. Manette is his real name, Alexander Manette. But when he calls himself 105 North Tower, I think that is one of the most powerful moments in the entire book. Because in that moment, you don't need to know the specifics of the horrors that he went through or that he was abused, that the abuse that he suffered at their hands. It is literally all summed up in that moment when his name is the identity of the place that he belonged to for nearly 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
I don't
because
know.
I mean, he basically didn't have an identity outside of it anymore.
Right? That was his world. He had no one else.
Yeah.
What do you think, Raj, about that part?
I totally agree. I mean, it's basically his dehumanization. So he was nothing. He felt nothing. He was probably seen by the guards as nothing. Well, yeah. What's 105 North Tower been up to today?
Yeah.
Same as usual,
Mm-hmm.
Has he gotten his food today? Stuff like that.
Yeah. Did 105 North Tower try to escape again? No, he hasn't tried to escape in 3 years. Is 105 North Tower still alive? Unfortunately.
Checking off on the list.
Yep. Like, just to be referred to by that, I mean, I imagine it being quite similar. What sort of got captured in that vein as well. There's many times when prisoners of war and different wrongfully imprisoned individuals, they're given a different, like, they're branded with a number or, a classification. It might be like Bravo sector number 227 or whatever it might be. Like, they're cataloged as something other than a human name. And that's mostly so the guards begin to disassociate them with being human.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the whole point of it. It's incredible what Dickens was able to capture in his writing with this. I mean that wholeheartedly. The level of despair and desperation in this, like you said, Saibot, in the opening of this story, you're just like, how could this possibly get any better or any worse? You know what I mean? But
Indeed.
then it does. So who was we can do it out of the whole book, or we can do it out of the first act, or however you guys want to do it. But who was your favorite character throughout the story?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first, Raj?
Sure. I have a couple that, I mean, for those who have read the book, um, it may seem like strange choices or it may be obvious choices, but Carton
Of course.
for the redemption arc,
Hmm.
and well, what's her name? What was it? Posey or whatever her name was.
Mrs.
Oh,
Pouse.
Miss Pause.
Is it Pause?
Pause. That's it. Pause.
Pause?
That's what the
Because
audiobook.
just because she was a badass.
Oh yes.
Right? I love her line where she's like, I am an English woman. I
Oh.
am your equal. I'm like, dang, all right, Mrs. Pouse, all right.
God damn it, you beat me to it.
Oh, did I?
I was going to talk about that in the favorite scene section. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll bring it back up again. It's okay.
Yes.
Who were your favorites, Saibot?
Maybe a bit strange, but yeah, it's actually none. I liked most of the main characters, but they're not actually the ones that stood out to me as my favorite characters.
Mhm.
They were actually the two in that little confrontation at the end. I really liked Miss Paws, even though she doesn't show up a lot, but she
Yeah.
has really good scenes when she's there. And the other one is actually what you could say is kind of the main antagonist, Madame Defarge.
Defrage. Madame Defrage.
That might seem strange, but the more I think about it, and the reason she's my favorite character is because after I finished reading and kind of thought about it, and I kind of realized what I think she's meant to represent, I really liked it. Speaking before I kind of get into that, to compliment on what Raj said, yes, the whole James Bond comparison, Madame Defarge would definitely be a good Bond villain for sure.
Yes.
But I really like how she kind of builds up over the story. You know, she takes down the names, very kind of ominous. She basically appoints herself to she decides who needs to live, who needs to die. The way I wrote about it, or what I wrote about her, was kind of like this. I wrote that she's kind of an avatar of the revolution itself.
Mhm.
She starts off as pretty passive and almost kind of like simmering, secretly taking down the names of people she thinks should die in the revolution.
Yeah.
Her true viciousness is revealed once it begins, at which point she appoints herself as the arbiter of justice. She gets to decide who should be judged and punished. And I almost saw her as a kind of like proto-secret police kind of person, the type that tends to be born out of these revolutions. You know,
Yes.
the Gestapo, the KGB, stuff like that. Like she would have been that if the revolutionaries had gotten what they wanted, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of part of the reason.
Probably would have been the head of it, quite frankly.
Yeah, so I don't like her because she's a good person. I like her because of the function she has in the plot.
The characterization was well done, in my opinion, because on the one hand, she's a straight up cold calculating bitch, and on the other hand, she's a product of her environment, right?
Yeah. This is something that I really appreciate about this book. It proves that nobody gets out of a war, a battle, a revolution clean. Yeah. Nobody. There's not, like, the way that the French Revolution is presented a lot of time, especially when you're learning about it in history class, is the peasants were oppressed, the aristocracy were the oppressors, the peasants overthrew the oppressors, and now France is this wonderful republic. And that's not what happened at all. They, in fact, when it came to Marie Antoinette, which I know a lot of people are already aware that the let them eat cake was a fallacy, but it was something that got the base, the peasants, riled. But she was accused of many crimes that she was not guilty. She was accused of infidelity. She was accused of treason. She was accused of spying. She was accused of murder of peasants, like of French citizens, for entertainment. There was a lot of stuff levied at her that was not true. And even though these people knew it wasn't true, they were too scared of the mob to say anything.
Yeah.
Because they'd be next on the guillotine.
Because then you're seen as a supporter of the status quo.
Yep, you're a sympathizer for the aristocracy, and that was a crime. And, you know, so a lot of innocent people, I think particularly what guts me, like Dickens, all of Dickens's stories really are just so powerful. I don't know if you guys have ever read Great Expectations, but that's also a fantastic one. A lot of people are familiar with Oliver Twist, and of course A Christmas Carol. But you know, with Dickens' writings, it the impact that it has just on like a human level. I think right at the end of the story too, I won't say who it is just yet. I don't want to give that away. I really hope, you know, Cal G, if you get a chance, definitely go read this book. But at the end where she's just a seamstress. She didn't do anything wrong. She was trying to survive like everybody else. But
Mhm.
but because she happened to be in a household, that was enough to condemn her to die. And it just breaks my soul a little bit, you know, that these people who started out with noble intention, you know, to be free of oppression and to stop being taxed to death, literally, um, it broke them. They could no longer recognize themselves or their cause, and suddenly, just like, you know, Raj had said, everything became the ends justifying the means. And I think, were you going to talk about why Monsieur Lafarge broke with his wife? Like, they didn't like break up, like they didn't get divorced or anything, but they broke opinion on something very specific. And that's when he realized his wife had basically given into bloodlust and wasn't the
Mm.
woman that she married, or was even at the beginning of, because at the beginning of the revolution, it was about justice. It was about opportunities for everyone. It was about no longer being oppressed, right? But
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I,
Ernest.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
wonder if, you know, he had any idea that his wife had some serious skin in the game, though.
well,
Personal family tragedy, right?
he knew, well, because remember, she says, you can tell them, you know who it was, you know why, I want to
I
do
guess,
this. So
but
but I think that he figured,
it really
since,
affected her.
yeah, I think you're right, Raj. I don't think that he recognized just how deeply seated that hatred had gone,
No.
at
No,
all.
because I mean, he is still kind of like a revolutionary with a conscience. At the end of the day, I mean, his name is literally Ernest.
Yeah, I know. Isn't
Yeah.
like the most, if that's not a dead giveaway of a character, the fact that Charles Dickens is writing it, you should know that this guy is going to be someone who, at the end of the day, really wants to do the right thing.
Yeah, and kind of noticing kind of the final thing I wrote about the Madame here is that, as you guys said, she was obviously wronged or oppressed by the aristocracy. So it's not like she did not have cause for it. Like, she wasn't she kind of turned that way later on, but she didn't begin as, you know, someone who used the revolution purely as a vehicle for like
Right.
sadistic pleasure or anything like that.
Yep.
But no, she became willing to kind of like judge people for crimes that those they were kind of vaguely related to committed, not themselves. You know, someone gets accused of like something that their distant family or ancestors did.
Yep.
You know, anyone who vaguely shares a group with them, and I'm like, you know, does that sound familiar to the current day? Maybe.
Too familiar.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Raj, do you want to tell them why Monsieur Lafarge did not help Madame Lafarge with her next intended victim? Because do you know what I'm talking about? The scene specifically in the book, right,
Well,
where she says she's going to go after
I would
someone.
like to think it was his conscience getting the
Mhm.
better of him. I would like to think. The reality is, there's so much blood flying around anyway. You know, at some point, there are people who, like poke their head up and think, okay, maybe enough is enough.
Yeah.
That's my take on it, because the reality that, in my opinion, is that, the oppressed can, become the oppressor.
Mm-hmm.
The abused can become the abuser. Talk about modern
Absolutely.
analogies. And I think, if I were him, I'd say my wife is basically constructing a hit list and
Yep.
carrying it out. It's almost like the modern day equivalent of the Twitter mafia being,
Mm-hmm.
pointed in the direction of go make them famous.
Yep. And when I picked this book, it was because we picked this book, 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and things had not really, things were not fantastic in the country, in the US, of course, in the world, but they certainly were not where they're at right now. Like, the parallels were somewhat eerie, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
I think so Calgie, I hope you still go read the book. There you are. I genuinely hope that you go and read the book, and I will actually make a comment on your comment here in just a second. But in the story, the reason that Monsieur Lafarge finally sort of breaks away from his wife and her rantings and her ravings and her knitting, is because Madame Lafarge is about to go after the 6-year-old daughter of Charles Evrémonde, who is the French aristocrat that gave up his land, gave up his title. So he is I won't say the main protagonist necessarily. This story, in fact, Mr. Carton, I believe, would be more considered the main protagonist, really, truly. But between the two of them, I would say that Evrémonde gave up his title, he gave up his lands, he gave up his French citizenship, he gave everything up because he didn't want to be part of the aristocracy anymore. This was back in 1775. He saw the turmoil. He gave up his land. He gave up his wealth. He moved to England to become strictly on his own merit, a man of his own merit and a man of his own making. But remember, we said that at the very beginning there was a doctor who was imprisoned. Dr. Alexander Manette. He had kept a journal. And what had happened was he had been thrown into prison for trying to save a young woman's life. And when he failed to do that, he reported it to the authorities. The problem was Charles's uncle, was he a viscount? I can't read my handwriting again. God dang it.
I think it was a marquis or something.
Yeah, the marquis.
Marquis. The marquis, who is Charles's uncle, was the man who beat her to the point she died. And so to keep the doctor quiet, that's why he had to go to the Bastille.
Yeah, he knew too much.
He knew too much. And he reported it to the authorities. He reported the death to the authorities. And that was the marquis. Now the nephew did not know about any of this when he left for England. And, he is tried as a French spy when he gets to England. And he's found innocent. And that is mostly due to Mr. Carton, even though he would not take that much credit. Now, Dr. Evrémonde has a daughter. And in the books, she's described as basically an angel. I don't know, Sabat Raj, I don't think that word got specifically used.
No, but she's basically supposed to be a purely good person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because she really didn't do anything wrong or particularly good for that matter, in my opinion. She was there as a focal point, I think, for bringing the doctor back from insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because of her devotion, her gentleness, her kindness, like this is what I wrote down. This is not Charles Dickens writing. So when this sounds cheesy and corny, it's because it's mine and it's not Dickens. But so because of her devotion, her kindness, her loyalty, her gentleness, and her unwavering love for her father, she is shown as a beacon of morality, innocence, and purity for the story. And because of that, she captures the attention of several men. Unwittingly, she captures their attention. But Evermond, once he is found innocent, the two of them get engaged, and they do get married, and they have a very happy life, and they have a child. Now, one of the men whose attention that she captured was Mr. Carton. But this is not a love triangle, which I am so freaking thankful for. Can I just say, this is actually this is why I think Mr. Carton is probably the protagonist of the story, because the self-sacrifice, not even the end, what happens. Calgie, I'm not telling you what happens at the end. If Raj or Saibot wants to talk about the end, that's totally fine. But I'm not telling you who said that last line. You have to go find out. But I think Mr. Carton was perhaps the best man in this entire story. I'm not saying, I think it was very noble of of Charles to give up his titles and his land and denounce his uncle and the cruelty of the aristocracy. But to be fair, he didn't stay and fight. He didn't try to use his birthright, his aristocracy, his his station to affect change. You know what I mean?
He got out of Dodge.
Yeah, he dropped everything and he left. Now I understand why he did that.
Yeah. I wouldn't hold it against him, because I mean his whole point was that he wanted to get away from all that stuff.
Yes. And he honestly didn't believe that he could do anything to affect change. But I think that the sacrifice, the fact that you're giving up everything everyone and you're crossing the channel to start a life in a different country, that is quite admirable. But I think the fact that Carton was able to be honorable when he loved this other woman, and the fact that she, just out of purely being kind to him, which tells you that Carton's story is just freaking tragic as well. What you figure out, much like you do with the doctor, simply through the way that Carton speaks specifically about himself, it's not even self-pity. It's just he has resigned himself to a life of misery because he truly believes there's nothing else for him. Yeah. And then she, through simply being kind to him directly, not treating him dismissively and not thinking that she's better than him or anything like that, simply by being kind to him, he is drawn to her, and she sort of helps pull him out of the sherry bottle.
Yeah.
Carton drinks, by the way, a lot.
Yeah.
I think I wrote down there's 17 different scenes where he has a full glass of sherry in his hand.
Yeah, and Carton definitely is high on the list as well, because Charles is obviously he's obviously a basically purely good person, much like how Lucy is.
Yep.
And I don't, first of all, I do not think that goodness should ever be overlooked or dismissed, because I think that happens too often. So I don't want to rag on Charles or anything.
No.
But those acts of goodness do stand out more when a person who do not have much reason to be good performs them,
yes.
Carton, for example. It stands out more. And yeah, it is really tragic when you see him. Like you said, he's not really fishing for pity points at all. It's more he's made this really horrible, and this kind of I'm not going to get personal, but this did kind of stand out to me because I was kind of like feeling very depressed when I was young, kind of a younger stage in my life, where you kind of end up making this really horrible calculation where, like, literally, if I vanished, nobody would care. It's not even a sad realization. It's more like a calculation. And I feel like that's what Carton did, because he said, it was in one of the many scenes when he was like about to be passed out drunk, and he talked to a woman. I forget who it was, but he said, like, in a different world, someone like you might have cared about someone like me if I had been slightly different. And that's like really hits home to a lot of people, I think. But yeah, definitely a really good character. So speaking of which, I think we have mentioned our favorites, but which ones are your favorites?
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us. I think that if I had to choose an overall favorite character out of the story, it would be Mrs. Prouse. Solely because she is the guardian angel that everybody takes for granted.
Yes.
She has never allowed, considering everything that Mrs. Prouse heard, everything Mrs. Prouse saw, everything she went through, and it was solely out of, it was devotion and loyalty to this girl. And Lucy just always, like, never once did Lucy question if Mrs. Prouse was going to be there. Never once did she question if Mrs. Prouse would do something to help her. Never once did she question if she or her daughter would be safe in her charge, in Mrs. Prouse's charge, and specifically at the end, it is one of my favorite scenes, because the idea of what she is doing is, honestly, I think part of the reason it struck me so hard. I think that if a lot of liberals actually read this story from start to finish and actually like drove to understand it, and when I say liberals, I mean like the leftists of today, really the extremists, they might understand that
Progressives.
You have to know who you are in order to have a conviction like that, and in order to be that strong. And for Mrs. Prouse to not even let Mr. Cruncher know, you know what I mean? Like, she protected Mr. Cruncher. Like, there's nothing this woman would not do for the people she loves. And she is obviously, like, just based off of, she's clearly in shock. Just the way when Cruncher comes back and is like, "Are you ready yet? Like, let's go." Like, he has no idea what's happened, and she's just in there in shock. But then when he's like, "I'm going to go check and make sure." And she's like, no, you can't do that. There was a great crash. There's a bit of a mess, but we've no time, basically. I don't know the exact, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I can't remember the exact words, but she's basically like, "Get in the carriage. Let's go." And the reason that they have to get out of town is, again, because of that list. Because, that's part of it. But somebody is also in the carriage who was bound for the guillotine that nobody is aware of. But because Lucy and her daughter are Evermonds, the French, specifically Madame Lafarge, does not care that they're English. She doesn't care that, that Lucy didn't even know. Like, she was a child herself when her father was hauled off to prison, And she doesn't care that Lucy's child wasn't even born when all of this took place, when all of this transpired. She doesn't care about that. So that is what ends up happening when Monsieur Lafarge basically tells his wife that this is madness, this is insanity, you can't do this. Because it's one thing for, like, a child to get trampled in a mob rage or something. Like, it's an untargeted attack and it's a tragedy, right? But it helps fuel the mob. But now his wife is actively targeting, like, a 6-year-old child. A 6-year-old, guys. Simply because of the blood that flows in her veins.
Yeah,
so,
a bit fanatical, definitely. And you absolutely hit the nail squarely on the head with that one, with your description of Miss Pause, and I can't wait until we get to like the favorite scene section, because I have a lot to say there. But
Okay.
yeah, she is really great, and what you said there is it's really good, because yeah, like what I said, a lot of kind of like far, modern day kind of like far leftist types, and let's remember it was during this time period where we got the whole left versus right
Yes, this is where that was born
structure.
from.
Yeah.
And you can definitely see it. And basically, the big difference is that in the final confrontation with where Miss Pause is involved, we will see a clear differentiation being made between the two people involved. One of them is stronger than the other, clearly, because, like Lady G said, she has a conviction that is personal and very dear to her. She is stronger, literally, physically and willpower-wise, because she's protecting someone she loves.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the other person is driven by hatred because of a big, kind of flimsy cause that I'm willing to bet that most of them do not actually believe in. Most of them could not actually define it if they tried. And if they did try, many of them would not actually agree on the definition. And that is something we see. Like, you cannot draw strength from a big, indefinable cause that will not actually power you in a moment of desperation, like a moment of a moment of importance like this. But protecting someone you love, that will always hold up.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with Cybot on that. And what you see, which is also a parallel with what's been going on lately and continues to go on the extreme left, is, if left unchecked, the cause, you can lose sight of the cause, as has already been mentioned, but whether it's bloodlust or whatever, or foaming at the mouth or whatever, can take you to another level. I mean, Madame Defarge went from just creating a hit list to actually potentially doing the hit,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is there is a part in the book where Madame Lafarge looks at oh gosh, was it Lucy? I think so Lucy it's Lucy, and she's talking about our children have been dying of starvation and thirst in the streets. Our women have been brutalized, our men have been beaten. You really think I care about the woes of one wife? Like, it shows you how poisoned Madame Lafarge has become to, like, I think part of it is she's drunk on power, and then the other part of it
Yes.
is she's just so fueled by rage that she does not care who it envelops, as long as it's anybody that's in front of her that she thinks could possibly, even like you said, Raj, be remotely tied to that group or that individual that she deems evil.
Yeah. She doesn't really see. Yeah, she's gotten so kind of into it that she doesn't see the people, and that individual suffering does matter. It's really funny. Like, I rewatched it's kind of unrelated, but I rewatched the Stars Spartacus TV show recently.
Oh, yes.
And it's funny. I like how that one has a lot better writing than a lot of more recent stuff. But basically, in that one, there's a moment where the main character Spartacus says, oh, what does he say? Because he says, "Oh, if one life has no value, then none are of worth." And that is what you miss. That's what you forget when you only see the big picture, like Madame Defarge does. She only sees one group oppressing another, so literally anything can be excused on my part towards an individual.
So
Absolutely.
I can understand her husband, thinking to himself and maybe even telling her, out loud, it's like, so what were we fighting for again?
Yep, because he sees, like, it was supposed to be the end of the blood and the screaming and the torment and the torture. And, the book doesn't go into great descriptive detail, but you can basically assume that, and I mean, this is historical fact, but the way that Charles wrote it, you can assume that the women of the aristocracies fewer of them were sent to the guillotine, but they still went, of course, the queen being amongst them. But many of them were brutalized. They were violated again and again. And it was payback, it was retribution, it was reparations, it was, revolution. And all of those horrific acts they were like, okay, well, we're going to excuse it. Like, turnabout's fair play or something like that. And the thing is, when you allow that to be your driving force, like you guys said, it's going to consume you. You're going to become the villain.
Yeah. And it kind of becomes its own driving force in a sense, because there's also, and I got this feeling both from this book and from the actual historical events, that there's this feeling of almost cruel giddiness with getting your hands on something that otherwise would be considered sacrosanct and beyond you. Like, why they turned on the church, for example. Priests and church, that's off limits, but now we have the power. Oh, the nobles, you can't do anything to them. Well, now we can, it's going to get really dark here, but we can do things to the female nobles that we wouldn't otherwise do. We can kill the male nobles. We can even kill the king if we want. We are the ones in power. And that, going back to what you said about all the accusations being slapped onto the queen, that just becomes excuses for reveling in the fact that you're doing something that just goes against what was the natural order before.
Yeah, you're sticking it to the man.
Yeah,
even if you're and you can quell that voice inside you, that conscience inside of you, because you are trying to convince yourself that this is the right thing. But I'll tell you what, when after the French Revolution, because of course, if for any of you that don't know, yes, the royal line still exists in France. Like, there's still princes and princesses and dukes and duchesses. They don't rule. It's not like in England where they have a constitutional monarchy. But there are still there's still ancient aristocracy lines in France. And that is because, and this is not in the book, this is historically speaking, and Cybot sort of alluded to it earlier, the revolutionaries did not get what they wanted. In fact, they realized just how much stress and how much of a problem it is running a country, running a nation, trying to put food on people's table. Because here's the thing. Fields, and even with technology today, fields do not plow and sow and reap themselves. Clothes do not make nor mend themselves. Streets do not get cleaned themselves. You need infrastructure. You need people. You need people who are willing to work. But when the peasants of France were like, well, we've earned why do we have to go back to work?
We don't have to be peasants anymore.
Yeah, why are you thinking we need to go back and farm? Why are we the ones feeding you? There was food short. I mean, you guys want to talk about a terrible situation. There was legitimate food shortages. Like, they were already starving, but they had at least had something. And there was, of course, black markets. Like, if you guys ever want to read about the underground food network of pre-revolution France, it's actually quite fascinating just how much food got moved through those channels. And they moved people that way too. Like, anyone that they thought might be threatened from the crown. It was very much similar to like an underground railroad. But suddenly now you've told all of these people who've been working their entire lives that we're free. We can do what we want. Okay, well, something that comes with freedom is responsibility. And, the French revolutionaries figured out it took them one and only one really hard winter when there was no food, when there was no clothing, and there was not enough shelter, enough sanitary shelter for them to figure out that, maybe we do need someone to help us out. So the revolutionaries, I mean, they are basically the epitome of be careful what you wish for, almost. And this book does not specifically touch on that, but you can kind of start to see it happen. And I think especially Madame Lafarge was she got everything she wanted, and look what happened. You know what I mean?
Indeed.
She was very hell-bent on her mission, and she continued to send people to the guillotine, and she would justify it. She's like, she was not the one who actually, let the blade fall on their head. She's not the one that's beheading them, but she's the one sending them there.
Yeah.
But she's justified that as, she's not killed them, they've killed themselves, or they were traitors to they're traitors to the citizens. So there's a very big shift in language in the book too, if you pay attention to it, guys. I don't know if you caught on to it too, but in the beginning it was the mob, it was the revolutionaries. So we went from mob to revolutionaries to citizen. In fact, that's how they greeted each other. They said, "Good afternoon, citizen. Good afternoon, citizen. How fares the revolution today? It fares well."
It very much was paralleled to a certain extent in the Russian Revolution that followed.
Mm-hmm.
Citizen, comrade. I'm not saying they're, like leaning in that direction during the French Revolution, but the parallel, I saw some parallels there with, post-revolution, how were things getting done. So what happened at the end of the Russian Revolution? They went and had a civil war.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's absolutely a perfect analogy that you've made there, Raj. Because what these terms are shibboleths. Do you guys know what that is?
No.
It's really interesting. And I would suggest that people who don't know what a shibboleth is look it up, because it's really fascinating. A shibboleth is a term that an in-group uses to identify other members of that same in-group.
Ah.
I think I could be wrong here, but I think it's a Hebrew word from like a Hebrew tribe in the ancient past. And the idea was that it's associated with some story. I'm not super up on it, but basically what they would do is that this tribe would go out and then they might meet other Hebrews or members of the same tribe. But in order to make sure that they were members of the same tribe, they would call out shibboleth, because this was a word in their language. And if the people understood what that meant, okay, then we know, okay, these are of our people, the same tribe, they are also Hebrews, they are not enemies. It's like a code word, basically. And that's
it's like that whole Jacques thing.
Yeah, pretty much. Because exactly that is what comrade became in the Russian Revolution. Because if I say, "Oh, how are you doing today, comrade?" and they respond back, it's a superficial sign that we're on the same side. Because if you do not return it, oh, maybe you're not a communist. In fact, maybe you're not a good supporter of the revolution. And that is exactly what citizen is here. Because of course, a citizen would support the revolution because it is for us. It's for our sake. Why would you not say the same back to me, fellow citizen? So it's a shibboleth, as it's called.
Because if you ain't with us, you're against
Thank you for that.
Yeah, look it up. It's spelled like a Lovecraftian word, but it's real.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll delve more into that. That's the first time I've heard that term that I can recall. I didn't know what that was. Thank you, Cybot. But yeah, there's a lot of that in this book. And the spy network that is involved in this, we meet several spies in this book. Some of them are somewhat dismissive, and then others have direct impact on the story that we are reading. So others were more like revolutionary spies.
Sorry, Lady G, I'm gonna have to step out for about 5 minutes, but I'll be right back.
Okay, not a problem.
Okay,
not a problem. But yeah, so the spy network itself, I think I would definitely have to agree with you and Raj. It's definitely Bond is a good comparison to it, because you don't actually you get names that are whispered and certain names that are known and get added to the list. But a spy, of course, can change their identity.
I'm getting this image in my head where someone makes like either a current day version of these events or like a James Bond in the past, where Madame Defert is like a Senior on the top-esque character, where she like gets her way into Bond's bed and then like gets her hand on a secret list of like MI6 agents, and she like gets all these names. Like, it's really
this story, I am so thankful, because could you imagine, Cybot, if they tried to make this into a film today? God help us. Madame Lafarge would be the protagonist at the end of this. You know she would.
She would be like what they did with Cruella de Vil, basically.
Yeah, basically. Absolutely. While Raj has stepped aside, I'm going to here we go, Kalji. So your comment from a little while ago, about 40 minutes ago, where you said you can see that in hindsight now, talking about teachers and everything like that. And you had said you've read Philip K. Dick, Ray Bradbury, John Steinbeck, and Harper Lee. I recognize Ray Bradbury and John Steinbeck, of course. I know a little bit about Harper Lee. I'm not familiar with Philip K. Dick. So definitely let me know more about him. But there's, those are some good authors. But you had said that your public school, your city school education is lacking. And I think that is very much what you said here. The teaching style of a lot of teachers that you've had was not very engaging. If you have a teacher who is very utilitarian, the likelihood of any student really learning anything goes down drastically. If you do not have an engaging teacher, if you don't have a teacher who is willing to work with her students or his students, or a teacher who isn't just there for a paycheck and to actually impress knowledge and discovery on these young minds within the appropriate age group, you're going to end up disappointed in your education. And I think that that's a fair statement to make when it comes to just about anything. It's tragic that a lot of people, like when I say, Kalji, you had no idea that those lines came from this book. But they are quoted ad nauseum in other IPs. Charles Dickens is actually one of the most quoted authors, I think, ever. And, it's very much kind of the same vein when we talk about like the development of language. People are like, well, now instead of writing out, laughing out loud, we just put LOL. And I said, yes, but you have to understand what the basis for LOL is, because like, imagine you just walk up to someone and you say LOL. And it's like, okay, well, does that mean lots of love, laughing out loud, little or less? You know what I mean? Like, you can't, if you do not understand the context and the base of slang, that's why when people say, oh, well, slang is slang, but there are plenty of people who don't know like different dialects of English. Like, we can speak the same language, but if I said something from, where I grew up down here. Oh, perfect example. I was on Father Miller's stream yesterday, and I said, was that it? I can't remember. But basically, I said the word show. And I was referring to the Top Gun Maverick picture show, like the film. And they're like, it's a movie. And I'm like, well, where I'm from, like, everything's a show. Doesn't matter if it's TV, doesn't matter if it's a movie, doesn't matter if it's a play. Like, we're going to go see the show. We're going to go to the show. Everybody from back home knows what I'm talking about, but I had to literally, even though it's you guys know that word, right? Raj, Saibot, I'm sure you've heard the word show. You're familiar with it,
well,
right?
Didn't it come from originally the let's go see the moving picture show.
Yep. And so where I'm from, everything is a show. And if I said that back where I'm from, nobody would have questioned. They would have known. If I had been like, let's go see the Top Gun show, they'd been like, okay, we're going to the movie theater. Like, we're going to go see Top Gun Maverick. There wouldn't have been a question, but I actually had to like break it down and explain it. Because that's right, Kalji. It was the nostalgic Nirvana. Yeah. Yes, that was Thursday. That's when it was.
Because there are regional differences to slang.
Yes, exactly. So, when people are talking about slang or English, it's entirely you can get entirely different interpretations based on words that you use, even though you're speaking the same language. And so I think what's really important, Kalji, with your comment is, these teachers, it's not up to them to break down every single dialect. It's not up to them. It's not for them. First of all, it would be impossible. I mean, could you imagine trying to cover every piece of slang, every piece of dialect, every piece of colloquialism when it comes to just one language, right? It would be an impossible task, to try and teach that to students. So what a teacher's job is to teach the core of that language so that you can then understand the evolutions of those different regional colloquialisms, regional slang. Like Raj was saying, like yesterday, like you had just said, moving picture show. So when we call it a show, that's literally where it's derived from. So if you understand that movies were originally called a moving picture show, then it makes much more sense why where I'm from, we call everything a show. Similarly, like there's certain comparisons, like I've heard many times down in the South where it's hotter than Satan's butthole down here. They use a different word. But if you don't understand, like if you have no frame of reference to Satan and understand that he is supposed to obviously be in hell, then that statement, you're not going to understand that statement. You know what I mean? So, I think, especially because when it comes to inner city schools, the ratio of student to teacher is so high that teachers just simply don't care. And they do the bare minimum to make sure that you can get out of their class so that they can cycle through the next group of students the next year. Right. And that's a system failure. Like people always want to talk about like systemic oppression or systemic this or systemic that. One of the greatest issues in America is our school structure, our public school structure, because it is set up specifically the way it was designed was for you to know just enough to be an effective factory worker. That's it. Work on a factory line. That's literally how it is designed. And it needs to be changed. And homeschooling is a fantastic alternative. But when education was removed from the church and given to the government, it only took like 20 years before they turned it into essentially like basically the pre-assembly line for their factory workers. And it's still the same model that we're using today, which is why it's so ineffective. But Kalji, something that I would hope that you do, especially as we do more of these book clubs, is that even if you have to watch the movie first, like sometimes I've noticed that helps people, especially, I don't know if there's a movie I'm assuming that there's a movie of A Tale of Two Cities. I would assume the BBC did a series on it like they did with Pride and Prejudice and stuff like that. I've never seen it.
Probably.
There are also YouTube synopses
yes.
of A Tale of Two Cities that basically, it's like A Tale of Two Cities in 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
There you go. Yeah. So if having that sort of like pre-cognitive jumpstart helps you with understanding the story or helping read the story so that you actually have a grasp on who the characters are, what their motivations are, what they do in the story, then I am all for that. I found out actually that there are several people. I said this on another live stream, but there's people who have no voice in their head. Like they have no, like, have you guys ever talked to like when you read a book, can you hear yourself in your head reading that book?
Yeah.
There's people that can't do that. There's no voice in their head. It's just words. It's just dense. And so it doesn't stick the same way. And so I don't know that that's you at all, Kalji, but I do know that there are people like that. And they have said that they have to watch the movies and then go read the books because it's too hard for them to try and basically comprehend what's going on. It just looks like words on a page to them. They can't actually immerse themselves in the story, which I found shocking. But apparently, it's like almost half the planet is like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I may provide some personal observations to Cal G's comment there.
Yes.
I don't know if y'all remember when I said at the beginning of the stream, I found it a lot easier to read this when I was in high school, which is like a million years ago. But it was, seriously pre-internet. It was. We're talking the 70s here. So
there you go. Okay.
That said, when I think about my having said that, and then I just read, okay, it's back. Thanks, Cal G's comment. It made me think of something, and the high school I went to was in a small town in 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 southwestern Ontario, St. Catharines. So it was a GM town. So the factory mentality of the school system is not lost on me there. But I think me then reading it versus me over the last month reading it, I won't say I'm two different people, but I'm two different people. I think I read it in order to get it over with back then. I didn't really appreciate it and what it, dare I say, had to say to me until I was reading it as an adult. I don't think it mattered who my teacher was. Now, not everyone's school experience is the same. So obviously yours or everybody's would be different. But the analogy came into my mind. Watching Bugs Bunny when I was a kid was funny because, things blew up and, a guy got the gun pointed in his face instead of Bugs Bunny's face and blah, blah, blah. It was funny. Watch it as an adult. It was not meant for children. It was meant for adults. So you start understanding all the little inside jokes in Bugs Bunny and all the, related cartoons. A lot of it was political satire. A lot of it was making fun of the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, everything, violence on TV. So I didn't get it as a kid because I got what kids get out of it, which was, funny things, haha, that's funny, next. And then with the attention span of a kid as well. But watching those as an adult and trying to find them on TV now at all is even more of a challenge, but it's another thing. But watching them as an adult, I appreciated all of those things, as funny as they were then, on a whole different level.
I bet. As
I do now. And I don't think this type of reading is any different. It's just how complex it is. That's all. That's my take on it.
Yeah, for sure. And the whole teaching thing is very interesting because obviously, as I said, I work as a teacher. I have always worked in small towns, which is where I've always lived, and it's what I prefer. I've never tried being a teacher in a big city, nor would I want to. So I cannot sell what that existence or what that experience is like. I would defend teachers a bit more, in regards to what Lady G said earlier. Yes, I know that sometimes it can come off as being very like production line-ish, and there are schools that are like that. Again, I cannot speak for them, but yeah, it's very challenging. And of course, you have to do your best to engage with your students. Like the whole, having a reading class. Okay, we're gonna read A Tale of Two Cities for the next month or more or something. That type of class can be absolute hell for the students, or it can be super great depending on how you set it up. Absolutely. Speaking of, again, I don't know how much time Lady G has allocated for this, but I do have, I have, all the time in the world. I'm just thinking of, I'm just looking at the notes I've written up here, and it's kind of like a
Go for it.
miscellaneous collection of stuff.
The only thing that the only other thing that I really want to hit, I think we've had some really great discussions, but like I said, I always try to make these are going to be 90 minutes to 2 hours, and I think we can comfortably go to 2 hours with this one.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would
but
love to go for 3 hours, but that's just me.
yay. If I had the time, but before we get in, because it sounds like you took some really great notes, Saibot, we'll start with Raj. What was your favorite scene or scenes in the book?
I have two favorite scenes. One in the first courtroom when, the lookalikes basically blew the original case out of the water.
Yes.
And then in the prison cell when the lookalikes, whether anyone saw that, at the beginning was going to foreshadow something, they basically, there was a switcheroo pulled, not by choice either, but it was for the good, let's put it that way. So I like the two switcheroo type. It wasn't a full switcheroo in the court, but it could have been, and that's what was portrayed as the level of doubt to blow the case out of the water. So if it worked then, it can work again, and I think that's what the author used.
Yeah, I love those
cool.
scenes. Saibot, what about you?
Ooh, yeah, there are so many great scenes in this book. There are so many you can talk about, but I, for one, and sorry to anyone in the chat, but I will have to go into some details regarding something that happens at the very end of the book here.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to, like, if anyone out there wants to read it but don't know this yet, maybe you're okay with hearing it, or maybe you want to pause something. I don't know, but I will have to go into some detail here to talk about it, because at the end of the day, I always like a good comeuppance and a good resolution. So my favorite scene will have to be the confrontation between the two kind of hardcore ladies in this story, which is Miss Pause and Madame Defarge, when she comes to do some evil final deeds. Because the contrast between the two women is just incredible, the way they set it up. And it's so great because basically she comes to a secluded location, I think, to kill. That's when she wants to kill the child, right?
Yeah. Well, she's going to kill Lucy so that
Lucy,
she can kill the child. She's going to kill the wife first and then go for the daughter, because
Yeah. So kind of for the people watching or listening to this, basically the most evil woman in the book is going after the most good woman in the book, and standing between them is the most underrated but also the most hardcore woman in the book.
Freaking hero.
She's so kind of great because she's not like a soldier, she's not like a warrior or anything, but she probably could be, let's be honest. Because the way she's described is like this kind of brawny, very tough, almost, I think the book literally describes her as wild looking at one point.
That's very beginning. She's red hair, wild looking, and strong. Like, she's strong. Like, when she's,
if she's not like Irish or Scottish or something, I would be surprised.
Yeah, Lucy faints. So to set that up, and the thing about this too, Dickens does such a good job, is Lucy faints and Mrs. Prouse like scoops her up like she weighs nothing. Like, just, she shoulders her and she's like, how dare you? Like, she's like, what kind of banker are you? She's literally scolding Mr. Laurie. It's like, what kind of banker are you? Like, how dare you affect a young woman such as herself this way? Like, she's mad that harm came to her charge, emotional harm. Like, it's a good emotional harm that happens because she's just found out. Well, I guess we'll spoil that part too. She just found out about her father.
Indeed.
And so, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, before we even like continue with the final scene, she gets a great introduction as well.
Oh yeah.
Because I think she literally like flings Charles, is it, across like the room, or something. She like pushes him aside or something.
Yeah.
And I remember the book says, the book describes it as, a brawny hand pushes him aside. And I was certain that this was on kind of like big bodyguard or something. Nope. It was this like red-haired wild woman.
Yes.
And then so kind of like to kind of get back to the final scene there, they show up, and the madame is looking for Lucy, and they confront each other, and it's so great because they don't speak one another's language. One is French, one is English. Both of them speak to the other, kind of like asking questions, making threats, but they're basically speaking to the air, or like kind of like just speaking to each other, even though they don't understand. And Mrs. Is it Miss or Mrs.? I forget. Miss Prouse.
Ms. Prouse is Ms. Prouse.
Yeah. She has some great lines here. Like she, at one point, she says, "quote, you might from your appearance be the wife of Lucifer."
Yes.
And that is so good because I think what she's basically saying is that she's like deceptively like pretty or like attractive, like she maybe innocent or something, but like kind of hiding something more evil.
She's a deceiver.
Yeah. And she herself is described, like I said, but kind of coarse, a bit rough around the edges compared to this French woman here. And, you know, they have this great line about how, you know, if you touch me, I won't leave a handful of your black hair on your head, or, you know, and Madame Defarge, to be fair, isn't like she's threatening her right back. Like, if you touch me, I'll tear you to pieces, she says.
Yep.
And then they're getting closer and closer to each other. And speaking of patriotism, which is a common thing in this book, speaking of the grand kind of vacuous cause versus the more personal, the French revolutionaries are very, you know, oh no, I'm more patriotic. No, we are more patriotic. Madame Defarge says, well, I am a patriot. But it feels like an empty claim. And then you have Mrs. Prouse here, like proudly saying, you know, I am an English lady, and therefore I cannot allow this. Like it's almost like she has an expectation of herself because of what she is. And I really like that because, again, I mentioned in the first meeting, in the first book club meeting, you know, that, you know, obviously Tarzan is my favorite kind of literary character. Mm-hmm. And as she said that, I could almost picture her jumping on a table and just pounding her chest, basically, with pride. And then, of course, you know, the madame goes to go past her. Madame Prouse wraps her arms around her and says, you know, literally, my love for Lucy is making me strong enough to hold you back, and I will literally hold you until we both pass out or die.
Yes.
They tussle, they wrestle for a bit. It's not like a big freaking action scene. It's literally just a brawl between these two ladies.
Yep.
And in a very symbolic moment, and again, sorry for spoilers, but this is very important and it's very symbolic. Madame Defarge ends up accidentally shooting herself with her own gun. And I don't think that symbolism goes over anybody's head. This is a cycle of violence that she initiated and which came back to strike her down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's basically, this is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And it's a very clean and very direct message. Mrs. Prouse, she triumphed because she was motivated by love, not hatred.
And the thing too that got stolen outside of Madame Lafarge's outside of her plan being foiled, like her, but outside of Miss Prouse, like quite frankly, Miss Prouse unintentionally, like out of purely defense, like when you look at that whole situation you just described, she was, like you said, defending her charges. She was defending those that she loved and cared about. She was willing. Because at this point, too, sorry about that, you didn't bring up. She has not let Madame Defarge know that Lucy's not in the room. Lucy's no longer there. Lucy and her daughter left in a separate carriage, and because they didn't want to weigh it down, because they had to get them out because they knew the revolutionaries were going to come for them. You know, when I think it's Cruncher is talking to Laurie, he's like, he says, Miss Prouse and I will follow in another carriage so that we don't weigh it down. We'll get the rest of the bags and it'll just be us. And they're not looking for us anyway. Right. Mm-hmm. Well, so Lucy's gone, like everybody's gone. It's just Miss Prouse in the house. But so there's many times where Miss Prouse could have been like, she's not here. You know, she, like, they've already gone. You're too late. You know, she could have easily sort of deflected and had Madame Defarge run out and try to like chase them down or something like that, in hopes that they had already made it to the boat, right?
Well, they couldn't really communicate, could they?
No. And so so Miss Prouse is just like, she's lying down and resting because her husband's about to be decapitated. And, you know, so we won't have it. And Madame Defarge, like, her whole thing is she wants to wipe out the end of her line, because while what she did was she took a man, Dr. Manette, wrote a diary while he was in prison. Because what else would you do? What else would you do? 18 years, no companionship, not another soul to speak to. Of course you're going to write things down. And of course, and here's the other thing. Dr. Manette was able to not hold that hatred, that because he was thrown in jail by Charles's uncle. Charles has his name. Charles bears that same name. And in fact, when Charles tells Dr. Manette his real name, the day that he's supposed to marry Lucy, he tells them both who he really is. The doctor relapses into basically PTSD, like shock. Like he can't communicate with anybody. He goes back to cobbling because he's so distraught by the mere mention of that name. Yet he still allows Charles to marry Lucy. He still loves his granddaughter who shares that blood. He still, like, he has not taken the bitterness that was in him in prison and foisted it onto Charles or his granddaughter. He has that, like, that's something that is a wonderful theme in this book, that Dr. Manette, even, like, he had to redescend back into kind of that madness and that darkness, but he came back out of it with forgiveness rather than vengeance.
Yeah, it's also kind of funny towards, I think, the end, the latter part of the book, where he end up kind of like using his former status as a prisoner of the Bastille to more or less be like an icon for the revolutionaries, so that like gives them a free pass.
Yep. Which, hey, you know what? Quite frankly, he earned it. Like, it's not like, you know, normally I would be like, oh, you're just like waving your influence around. Post-revolution France.
No, he did good.
Yeah. But yeah, so Saibot, I think you're so right on that scene. Sorry that I kind of hijacked it, but like, you know, I think there's just so many themes of where people, Madame Defarge is a really good like warning against
I could tell,
power.
Yeah, I could tell that you really enjoy that scene as well. So that's
Yes, but I think you're so right. Where like it comes back, she gets her comeuppance.
Oh yes.
And the thing too is, okay, I'm gonna spoil something else. Raj, this was your favorite scene in the prison. A switch happens, and the lookalikes happen. Not only did Madame Defarge meet her demise by her own hand, but the bloodlust that had led to this entire chain of events was not realized at all. At all. Charles is meant for the guillotine, and he does not go. He doesn't go. I won't tell you why, but he was meant for the guillotine, and Charles does not go. And I think, honestly, Cal G, if you give this book a read, even if you do the audiobook, if you have to go watch one of Andrew Hoyle says that there's been quite a few films and there's quite a few TV shows too. If there's a BBC version, an older one, I wouldn't recommend a newer BBC, but if there's like an 80s or a 90s BBC TV show, I would recommend. They did a great job with the Pride and Prejudice series, so I would assume that that if it's an older BBC, they did a good job with this one. But just to understand the story, because the context of that final line, because again, you know, like you said, Raj, in Wrath of Khan, this line legit, it gets quoted, and it's the book that Spock hands to Kirk, right? And so this last line, when you understand the context of what is happening, when this person says it is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done, and it is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known. When you understand what is actually happening in that moment and why this character is saying what this character is saying, I can't tell you how many times I have heard that line quoted and it be used incorrectly based on the context of this story. You know what I mean? Like when people are like, oh, it is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. And they're talking about like they've built up their business, or they helped another person find their way, or they've come to some type of revelation or realization or epiphany. And I'm like, I don't think any of you actually understand what that line is. Because if you did, you would actually understand the gravitas of what you are referencing, because this is a very heavy and very poignant final line, at least for me. But
for sure.
Raj, what I know we said that your two favorites are the lookalikes in the courtroom scene, but out of the two scenes, which one do you prefer better? The one closer to the end or that first courtroom scene?
I think the one at the end, because soon as I read that, I said, the courtroom scene.
Okay. Hey, that's awesome.
And just so you know, that the last line in A Tale of Two Sissies is actually the second last line in A Wrath of Khan as well, because Admiral Kirk says it right before he answers the question, how do you feel? And he says, I feel young. But right before that, he said, it's just something Spock wanted to say to me on my birthday. Because Spock basically gave up his life to save his friends.
Yeah. Oh man, that makes it see. And like when you read this story and then you actually understand what is like, look, the depth of that. Star Trek used to be so intelligent. Oh my word! Like
that can be said about so many things.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But just the poignancy of that, the true depth of that entirely changes when you actually understand this story. It's so fantastic. But outside of that, so Saiba, I know you said you had some other notes that you took.
Basically, my final set of notes falls into two different talking points, which I can go through really quickly. But it speaks to something you gave this book a lot of props for when you introduced it last time, which is that Dickens does a really good job of being fair to both sides involved. The blame goes around quite evenly. The flaws of the revolutionaries are quite apparent. The aristocracy is given their turn in the barrel. So basically my two notes, my final two sets of notes here kind of speaks to some of this, because, you can say that, of course, this is where the whole left versus right, liberal versus conservative thing began. And you can use those terms here. Personally, those terms applied more in the beginning of the French Revolution when some kind of order was still in place. But as things got more and more insane, what did these things even mean anymore? Like, even the people involved didn't really care. It was just, madness. But basically, speaking on the more, for I guess what would be the more conservative side, and I've said I kind of lean more conservative myself, moderate conservative in real life, so I have no problem saying this. But basically, the flaws of the more conservative, or the ones who stand up for the status quo, can be exemplified in a couple of lines. For example, in the very beginning, I think the first chapter, it's summed up pretty well, where someone reflects, in both countries, it was as clear as crystal to the lords of the state that things in general were settled forever. I think that's a good little line, because it shows that as far as the aristocracy is concerned, there is no impetus for change.
Yeah.
Because they literally do not see a problem. That's how separated they are from the people. And speaking to that, of course, we have the infamous incident where, you have the Marquis who runs over a child, opens the door. Oh, there's a child on the floor. Here, have a coin. You can always make more children, basically.
Yep.
It's literally nothing to him that a peasant child or a servant's child is dead. So that shows you how isolated and stagnated they had become. Now, of course, the shortcomings of the revolutionaries are pretty abundant, but one scene that I took note of, which kind of stood out to me, and again, maybe you don't want to get too real, but it is pretty chilly. It's towards the end when they describe, these quote unquote courts passing off their judgment. Here's another quote towards the end. Quote, at every juryman's vote, there was a roar, another and another, roar and roar, unanimously voted, at heart and by descent an aristocrat, an enemy of the republic, a notorious oppressor of the people, end quote. The fact that they're cheering these proceedings shows us that it's not really about the somber business of passing judgment.
No.
It's about watching a blood sport.
Mm-hmm.
They don't actually. Nobody thinks that these people are going to be given a fair defense. It's about watching. They want to hear the outcome that they expect. I expect these people to be guilty, and let's be honest. Looking at America for the last couple of months, there have been some pretty significant court cases, to put it lightly.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of expect these things to be treated with a certain solemnity.
Yeah.
Like, these are important decisions, but we see people treating it more like a sport almost. And if you don't get the outcome,
it's like the pre-game show followed by the game.
And if you don't get the outcome you want, they will literally behave like hooligans as well. And this is not a one-side thing. Both sides do this, but I will be unfair maybe and say that it does tend to happen more often on one side than the other, let's just say. But at the end of the day, I'm of the mind that, if you do not trust
when
the
it does
court,
happen, when it's
go on.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say,
I cut out a little bit.
If you don't trust the court to make a decision, then what's the point of even having a judicial system to begin with? It's just theater at that point, which is exactly what happens here. It's just theater.
Yep.
So what were you going to say, Lady G?
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think, I don't think that that's unfair. I think that that's perfectly honest. But the difference is that the one side does not react in quantity.
Mm-hmm.
The other side does. The other side, whether it goes in their favor, it doesn't go in their favor, there's going to be some form of mob activity, whether it's celebratory or violent, either way.
Yeah.
But the other side, when they react, it tends to be what I imagine happens when an immovable force meets, or an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Because you have had this one side who reacts to everything, consistently, quantity, they are always there. They're always reacting. They're always doing this. It doesn't matter if it's in their favor or not. You're going to see a reaction from them, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the other side is finally pushed to the point that they do react, one, it's usually too late. Because, they're trying to hold on to some type of civility and some type of decorum and order, because they don't want to be foisted into chaos and anarchy, which really nobody should want that. Nobody should want the French Revolution. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. You do not want the French Revolution to happen. I promise.
Like I said, we can toss around terms like, progressive and conservative when the discussion still has some kind of sense to it.
Yeah.
But what does that even mean when you get to that point?
Yeah, when it becomes a kangaroo court, when it becomes, it doesn't matter what evidence is presented. It doesn't matter who is doing the presenting. It's very much the Salem witch trials as well. You have been accused, you will burn at the stake. You will be shoved into the guillotine. You will be hanged. Whatever the case may be. They are seeking to find you guilty. You're actually already guilty. They are just simply seeking to justify your death so that they can hide behind false morality. And that's what this was. You're absolutely right. The courts, it was laughable when, if it hadn't been so tragic and if so many lives hadn't been lost, to actually, have the context of that revolutionary court or the Citizens Court, as it was called, presented, it was anything but justice.
Yeah, for sure. And that is, yeah, like, and like what happened in the French Revolution, it began with, I think, largely aristocrats being executed, which is a bad thing as well. These are still human beings.
Yep.
That's bad. But towards the end, it was people being put up there who had previously been supporters of the revolution and still was. They just weren't extreme enough.
Yep.
So at that point, those lines, those partisan or tribal lines didn't matter in the face of that mob madness. And that ultimately is, what this whole book warns against. Don't get there. Don't repeat that.
Because in the end, the mob will eat itself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because
Absolutely.
the mob cannot really have a single objective, because at the end of the day, we're not the Borg, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are a bunch of people thrust together. Most of the people there don't know what they want or how to get it. They're just there because that's where everyone else is. It's scary for sure. And it's good that we have this story, and it's good that we try to inspire others to read it, because I'm very firmly of the line that history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it does tend to rhyme.
Yep.
So let's remember that.
Let's not let history rhyme in this case. Let's make it very much not even like a haiku. Let's just very separate would be appreciated. Did you have another one, Saibot? Another note?
No, those two were my two
Those
notes.
two?
Kind of
Okay.
like a final blow against both the one side and the other.
Yeah. What about you, Raj? Any final notes or anything on the?
No, I enjoyed this. As difficult as it was for me to wrap my head around it, I'm glad I made the effort, because I look back to high school, me reading this just to get it over with, and didn't really learn anything about it other than what it took to pass the exam, which I did. I'm happy to say, but that was a long time ago. So many things have happened throughout our lives and are happening right now that can be seen in this book if things are pushed to extremes. When they burn books, they burn people's ability to learn from the past, whether it's fiction or fact. It doesn't matter. Learning is learning.
Indeed.
I wholeheartedly agree. I guess I'll tell you my favorite scene from the book. I do love when Miss Prouse is saying, "I'm an Englishwoman," but also the part where she basically calls Madame Laforge it's like basically Satan's. Like, she straight up calls her Satan's wife. I'm like, this woman's got a gun. You got some, like, Miss Prouse. I tell you what, she is amazing. But I think one of my favorite scenes is when Carton is able to fulfill his oath to Lucy. I'm trying to figure out how to word this without giving too much away, because I really want Calgie to go read the story. But, he did this. He did not do this for praise. He didn't do it for... Like, he did this. There was no motivation out of this other than he made an oath, and he literally is now able to keep it, and to keep his word, and to keep his promise. And it proves just how good of a man Carton is. And
he wants to do something meaningful in what otherwise seems like a very meaningless setting.
And I think, it makes you wonder how many, because what revolutions and wars tend to do, you have a victor and you have a loser. And, they say history is written by the victors, and that is true. But even in World War II, even in World War I, even in you look at war, and on the victor side, on the good guy side, right? Because the way that people tend to like to think of war is, oh, the people that won are the good guys and the people that lost are the bad guys, because it makes it all fit into a nice little box and you don't really have to get into the complexity of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you look at World War I, World War II, things like that, are you guys familiar with the Christmas Eve miracle?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories from First World War.
Where they play football. It's the British and America. So you've got the Germans and the Brits / Americans that are there.
Well, the Americans hadn't shown up by then.
Well, huh?
The Americans hadn't shown up by then.
No,
like
but there were
Christmas
a few,
happens in the first year in the war.
Mm-hmm. But there were because, like, again,
volunteers.
American volunteers were like, we have to go fight this war, because if we don't, like, we can't just sit on our hands. There were a lot of Americans that did that in both world wars before America officially ever got involved. But I think on the British side, you had a few Irish and Scots, and you had some Americans interspersed, but it was the British, basically the British Army, and some French. And they played soccer. And
I remember reading an account where some German soldiers from Saxony, I think, wrote about it, and they would like laugh because they ended up playing against a team made up of Scotsmen.
Yeah.
And those guys would actually wear, the kilts as part of their uniform. And if you know anything about that, they don't have much under the kilts. So these Germans would like laugh whenever they would like kick and jump, and the kilts would fly up. They're very charming little stories. So.
Yeah. So even in like these dark, horrific times, you get stories like that. You have stories of individual, like, just bravery and perseverance. Even like, you kind of want to root for this person, even though he's fighting with the Germans. Like, if only he could be on our side, but he's a German. Like, a lot of the people that were fighting with the Nazis, to give you an example, it was mostly so that the Nazis wouldn't come for them or their families. A lot of the time it was out of fear. There were a lot of Germans who fled Germany, but the ones who stayed, they weren't fighting for the Nazi cause. They were fighting for Germany. Yeah. They were fighting because they were Germans, and because it was for Germany, not for the Nazis.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, because I get really, I don't get pissed off. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine historically when I get why people do it, but I do get a little annoyed when people they just said the Nazis, right? Because you're really talking about the government at that point. And I mean, again, there were a lot of soldiers who believed in that ideology, just like there are in any case, but most of them are just regular people who find themselves thrust into this. And, at the end of the day, when in 1944, when the war has turned and the Soviets are about to invade, are you going to tell these German soldiers that they're not going to defend their homeland just because that might associate them with a bad government?
Yeah, of course exactly. Not. No.
And it's like saying, like, it's so weird when people behave like that and they say, the Nazis were in charge, so all Germans were complicit. That's not really how political ideology works. It doesn't just get beamed out from the government to all the people. Like, when Joe Biden got elected, did every American soldier suddenly become a Democrat? Like, no, that's not how it works.
It's not, but it does help tie things up in a nice little bow, and it keeps it from getting messy, and it keeps you, again, you're disassociating the humans, the individuals that got pulled into something much bigger than themselves. World War I was basically because of contracts, of very old contracts that had to be honored. That's how World War I started. Treaties and contracts.
Citizens.
Huh?
Yeah, go ahead, Rosh.
What'd you say, Raj?
Oh, nothing.
Oh.
Okay.
I thought you said something about World War I.
No.
Gotcha.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just said World War I was a much more kind of traditional conflict. It was based on alliances, territory, stuff like that. It made more sense.
He was your uncle. You owe him. You have a treaty with them. You have to fight, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it just got so big because the network of alliances has gotten so big and complex. World War II is harder because a lot of that is still there. People just focus more on the political stuff, understandably, because it was more politically motivated. But again, it's really dumb to just draw these big brushes because not even using a modern day example, just look at that time. That's like saying, oh, well, did every American agree with the Japanese American internment camp?
Right. Yeah. So, and a lot of Americans don't know about the Japanese internment camps. Like we call them internment camps. Those suckers they were concentration camps. It was, okay, you look Japanese, you're going into these camps because we don't know if we can trust you or not. Solely based on how it didn't matter that you were a second or third generation American. It did not matter. You went into those camps.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was very bad. But
it's important to see. Yeah, it's important to see these conflicts with like, I mean, I view the Soviet Union as being as bad, if not worse, than Nazi Germany. But that's not a very common view simply because of the difference in duration. To be honest, like Joseph Stalin, in my opinion, was worse than Hitler, but that's not really how we think of it. Because I mean, Hitler was in charge for what was it? A certain number of years. A decade less?
Yeah, it was about 12 years.
12 years.
Yeah. 12 years, yeah. So I had that number in my head. I mean, Stalin was in power for 3 decades plus.
Yep.
So
killed about 3 times.
People than anybody.
Mm-hmm. Stalin was, oh man, Stalin was bad. He was so bad. It would have taken him 2 days to wipe out the entirety of the state of North Dakota's population. 2 days to wipe out the state of North Dakota. It would have taken him 2 weeks to wipe out 2 weeks to wipe out like the state of Michigan. Like that's how much of a killing spree that man went on. It was insane.
This is not actually, it might seem like it, but this is actually not an unrelated conversation to the book we just had. Because
no, it's not.
I fundamentally believe that violent revolution doesn't work.
No.
And that is exactly what happened in Russia, just like it did in France. I mean, you can say what you will about the American Revolution. That wasn't really the same. No. And I think it's more accurate to refer to it by its other name, War for Independence.
Yeah.
It was more of a rebellion than a revolution, because I think more or less the intrinsic definition of revolution is that you want to change how the society works or how the government works. Like the Americans didn't want to change how the British government works. They just wanted to be cut off from it.
No taxation without representation. They simply wanted a voice in the government.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. I did not pick this book because I thought that there were going to be this amount of parallels. But as I was rereading it, I was like, oh my God, more people need to read this book again, because they would probably, you could probably tip them over with a feather when they did, because of the similarities, the parallels, the insanity of it all, and the fact that, like we said at the beginning of this, nobody gets out clean in war. Nobody gets out clean in a revolution. There's good people on both sides, and there's bad people on both sides, and it's very easy to be completely seduced and consumed by power, which I think was Defarge's. She became so powerful, like if she said a name, that person was done. And very few people, I can think of one person in history, 2 people in history, but one in particular comes to mind that was able to turn down power, and that would be George Washington, because they offered him to be king of America, and he said no. If he had said yes, America would look very different today. He could have said yes. Nobody would have faulted him. Nobody would have stopped him. You know what I mean?
Indeed.
But
who's the other person?
Yeah, because he, I believe, cited a Roman general who was, put in charge of Rome, basically, in order to be at the head of the army, in order to defeat whomever. and he came back and he handed in his power and said, "I go back to my farm." And that's literally what he did. And George Washington did the same thing, and I think he cited that as one of his reasons why, other than the fact that we didn't get rid of one monarchy in order to start another one. I mean, I'm not American, but I read a lot and I watch a lot of movies, so
for sure.
So the only other person that I can think of, and he wasn't really, we're getting kind of into, we're getting to the core of Christianity with this. That would be Jesus. Now, granted, he was God in human form and everything like that, but he was still a man, and he was given he gave himself free will. He was a human. He could have done what he wanted. He could have taken over the world at that point. He could have not died for our sins. He could have, allowed us to continue to suffer, and instead he sacrificed himself rather than
even at the last minute, he was asked by the people beside him, why don't you just call down your angels and get us out of this mess, basically. Yep. And he said, no.
Then his last thing being like, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. I mean, that is Christianity, the core of it. What Jesus' journey, his story, his sacrifice is the greatest love story ever told.
And speaking of, sorry, kind of interrupted, but speaking of, it's kind of funny that even in its time they kind of got ahead of this issue, because I'm not necessarily religious. I do have a lot of respect for those who are, and for religion as a whole, especially for, I am actually capable of admitting just how much of Western civilization and just our civilization in general is founded upon religious virtues and ideas. So it kind of shaped us into who we are. So from that perspective, I respect and admire it. But I like how the book of Genesis, which is about Moses, I like how, because that's the one where he speaks to God, yes?
Genesis and moving into Exodus. Exodus for all.
Oh, Exodus. Sorry, I meant to say Exodus.
Yeah, I was gonna say Moses. I was like, are you talking Moses? Because that's yes, Exodus. Yep.
He speaks to God in the flaming bush, and I like how it kind of unintentionally comes off as him kind of preempting modern day kind of more fedora tipping atheists who would say, well, if God exists, why doesn't he do this magical thing in front of me to prove that he exists? Why doesn't he pick up the rock and fling it? Why doesn't he make the sea part over there or something? Why doesn't he bring down fire from the sky? Moses literally has God show him this thing. Like I think he rots his hand. He shows the staff becoming a snake. Like he literally does what these atheists say. He performs all these magic tricks for Moses, and Moses still doesn't believe him at first.
Yep.
So like they got that more than 2,000 years ago.
Yep. And I mean, if we're to draw that parallel, if Moses didn't believe when he first saw and whatnot, I mean, can anybody be surprised that the Pharaoh didn't believe him? Like, didn't matter that he turned a river to blood, the Nile to blood. Didn't matter that there was an eclipse, the plagues, like the locusts, the cattle, the crops, the flies, the frogs. None of that mattered, and it took God returning the souls of the oldest firstborn Egyptians to him for it to actually sink in. Like, that is the hubris of humanity is truly astonishing, because you claim to demand proof of the existence of God, yet when he presents it, you denounce it or reject it or belittle it, even until it is to a point, again, like I was saying, is similar to the two sides. You have one who's always reacting, and then you have another who never reacts, but then when they finally do, it's something that you're going to make note of because it's usually very
All I will
It's-
say is that I will always have a grudge against Christianity for usurping my native religion.
oh, okay. That's fair.
Stig would probably agree with me.
Yeah, well, I mean, we like Christmas trees. What can I say?
And we don't like having ice giants roaming around. And now we don't
Oh.
anymore.
There you go. But yeah, so there's this book is actually really powerful, and I think you guys can understand sort of why I picked the topics that I did for us to hit, because I think we had some really good deep diving. And thank you both so much for reading this book, and I'm so glad that even though it was a bit of a thick or like a more dense read, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it overall, the story at least.
Yeah, I'm glad you recommended it.
Me too. Before I announce next month's book, Raj, do you have anything going on? What's up with you? How is life?
Just work.
Just work.
I hope to retire in a couple of years, so the countdown's on.
Hey, there you go.
I don't let anyone at work forget it. So yeah, I'm hoping to. It's one of the reasons why I really wanted to get into this book club, because I love reading and I haven't read in a long time, even though I buy all kinds of books on the regular, and I read 5 pages and I fall asleep, but because of work, basically. So I'm looking forward to taking more time, making more time to be able to do more of the things I love, which is read, listen to music, take care of my health, maybe even travel again. So it all starts with reading first, then I'll figure out where to go based on the places I see in the books, right?
Hey, you know what? That sounds good to me. Well, I hope that everything goes according to plan and that you get to start enjoying yourself more, and hopefully these book club meetings are enjoyable for you, and they help really sort of get you into that spirit of rediscovering yourself.
Because you couldn't get me away from a book for many years. In fact, I'd be reading and then I'd look up and it's 3 a.m. I guess I better go to bed so I can get up in 2 hours,
Hey, that's fair. I mean, I used to do that a lot as well, quite frankly. I still do a little bit, not as frequently though. But so Cybot, what's going on with you? What's in your neck of the woods? What's going on?
Well, I am in the midst of wrapping up work as well for the summer. Most teachers and staff at our school have already quit as of last week, but I kind of foolishly signed myself up to do summer school. One student showed up, so I've been working with him, but it looks like he might not be coming in next week, so maybe I get to finish early. So I'm going to go into work on Monday, and then I'm going to have summer off. I'm also really looking forward to continuing this book club, and I'm really glad that I get to be a part of it, because I used to be a much more prolific reader when I was a teenager. Then I fell off of it for a really long time until like 2 years ago when I got back into it. I've been, like I said, I've been digging deep into pulp and that kind of like classic early 1900s literature, which is now my new kind of hobby. Getting back into some of this stuff as well. So, and obviously, it's really great to be able to have really good conversations about them with Raj here, who I'm very happy to have met for the first time, and Lady G, who I've spoken to, Lady G, who I get to speak to in person, which is a real privilege.
Well, it's a privilege that you're here. I'm so glad, and I really hope that that you are like that. We discover some really good stuff for everybody. I think I don't know. This has been fantastic, guys. Like, I didn't really know what to expect when it came
hopefully we do a better job than your previous book club.
I was gonna say, no, this has been so much better than my previous book club. We got to have, really, really thought-provoking discussions. We got to help Cal G, discover where some of these iconic lines that are quoted so frequently come from, like where they originated, and hopefully you can go back and read this story and really pull something from it that's meaningful. And I'm not saying that there are not good books that are written today. That isn't what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there aren't talented authors, but I can wholeheartedly state that most of the good literature of today is not what is being pushed.
Yeah, consumer culture has done a number on literature.
Yes, very, very much so. And that's part of the reason that one of the stipulations for this was no YA novels, because I'm not saying there aren't good. I'm not saying that there are not good YA novels out there, but the thing is, they have altered the definition of YA.
What's YA?
Young adult novels.
Oh, them.
Yeah, them.
Books for teen.
Which used to be us, but now it's them.
Yeah, we say young adult is really kind of teenager books.
Well, and it's usually like soft core stuff. Like, quite frankly, they're feminist. They're feminist power fantasies at this point. And it's sort of tragic to see what is being presented to young people to read, because this is something we were saying. This book, when I was in junior high, and junior high students were reading this book. You know what I mean? Like, this is this story never used to be something that was unattainable or unreadable for people, but now if you ask someone in Gen Z about this book or this story, they're gonna look at you and be like, what?
Yeah, is that on Netflix or what?
Yeah, like, did they make a movie of it yet?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they made one in what, like 1980 or whatever, and then they'd be like, nah. And so it's just, it's really heartbreaking that these young people are believing lies about these stories. I mean, A Tale of Two Cities is it's been banned, or like people don't read it because they say that it's an elitist like sympathy story. Like, you're supposed to feel sympathy for the elites.
Wow, so because it doesn't simp for the revolutionaries, it's apparently bad.
No,
Wow.
That's honest to God their reasoning for it. And so this does not get read. And I don't understand that, because I mean, you guys have, like, you made a point of it, Cybot. This is, nobody gets out of this without getting a lick from Dickens. He has, quite frankly, he takes shots at both sides, rightfully so. At no point did I feel like, if you were to read this book, at no point did I feel like Dickens was trying to, like, radicalize anybody or make someone a sympathizer or anything like that. He wasn't trying to politically influence anyone. He simply told a story.
Yeah, the funny thing is, considering the subject, it's actually not a very political book, really.
No.
It's more about human lives being cast into these events.
Yeah. Everybody's human. That's what he's saying.
Exactly. Yeah. And it just so happens that this particular story is surrounded by politics. But at no point is he like, oh, you should be a revolutionary, or you should be a citizen, or you should be an elitist, or you should be an Englishman that, sympathizes with the cause or stands next to the aristocracy. At no point does he make that type of statement. And so, like, I think that that's the fundamental difference. Like, nowadays, like we had said earlier, Cybot, could you imagine if this was turned into a movie today? Like, could you imagine?
It would be, I can see if it was a movie or like that rewrote this book with a book like this with a similar theme, I can already imagine kind of like what the cover would look like. It would be like a reimagining of that famous French Revolution painting where you see the people with the French flag, égalité, all that stuff, the woman with like one breast exposed. But now it would be like a woman standing, with her back to the viewer with like a French, the revolutionary French flag in one hand, looking up at like a burning castle or like the palace or something. And, it would be all behind the revolutionaries. They would be the heroes. They would be the ones bringing down the power structure. It would be very one-sided. And that is why Dickens endures, because this is one of the most politically unstable periods in European history. And yet he pierces through what could easily be a political story to just urge the reader to remember that these are human beings being affected forever. Like, it warns us about Madame Defarge, who was an absolute nobody before. She was the wife of a servant, but she got tempted with the idea that she could be, like we said, in the future, she could be the head of the revolutionary secret police. Like, she could be a woman of power and influence. She could have more power than any of the aristocrats she hated, and she would have misused it terribly.
It reminds me a lot of Dr. Zhivago, and shortly after the revolution, some of the very, average Joe people have all kinds of authority because they are now, in charge. And they wield it like a baseball bat sort of thing, as opposed to governing wisely and justly. So a lot of parallels going on between revolutions. Those two.
Yeah. And Charles and Lucy just want to get out and live a good life. Carton just wants to do something good for once. Alexander wants to, he presumably wants to, regain who he was.
Now, if they made a movie of this, it probably should have been in the 60s or 70s, along the lines of, Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago, so David Lean. Don't make it now because it'd be a total Charlie Foxtrot now.
Well, and that's what Cybot and I like. Madame Defarge would have ended up being the hero of the story, for sure. And I don't think it would have done justice to Dickens at all if it were made today, at all. Even though you have strong women in this, like my favorite character is literally Miss Prouse. You have capable women, but see, that's the thing too. You have Lucy, who is like the pure, innocent, good, kind woman. You have Madame Defarge, who has been sort of chiseled into this stony.
You'd have an SJW Karen playing her.
Yeah, you would, but she would be the hero of the story, which would be just absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
Oh God!
She is neither stunning nor brave.
No.
I can imagine like if CW got a hand of this, like Jesus Christ! Like I actually spent much of today and yesterday actually watching Jay Longbone's reactions to the Batwoman series. I would highly recommend it. I watched every single one of those videos, and not a one pass where I didn't laugh my ass off. Basically, like that show is, it's so blatantly SJW, like cringe to the floor. Exactly. Like that final confrontation, it would literally be Madame Defarge going in there and convincing Miss Paz that she's on the wrong side and should let her kill these people. Because you're working for the aristocrat patriarchy, man.
Yep.
Yeah, and then they
Did you
go
just
and
assume
kill
a
all
gender?
the men. Yeah.
Hmm. Tragedy, devastation,
By
utter
the way,
just
one of my favorite, I guess, micro moments within my favorite scene is when she wraps her arms around her, and she literally shouts like, "I am stronger than you," before pulling off a wrestling move, which like lifts her up and then like throws her
uh-huh.
around. Like, damn.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Yeah, no, the whole this is one of my favorite stories for a reason. There's a reason that Dickens is his stories have endured, like, and it's not just this one. I mean, most people, like I say, for some reason I always have to bring up A Christmas Carol because that seems to be the one that people are most familiar with, or Oliver Twist. But Dickens has so many impactful stories and they're so different from each other. And he wasn't going for relevance, he was going for a good story. He spoke to the soul, he spoke to humanity. It wasn't this crap today where it's, oh, we have to be relevant, we have to make all the quippy,
Yeah.
you know, trendy sayings and make sure that we, oh, let's talk, you know. I read a couple of these YA novels that got sent to me, and they talk about Netflix in them. They're like, yeah, we're going to just like sit down and Netflix and chill. And I'm like, Netflix is about to not be a thing anymore. Like they are
Yeah,
on their
don't put real life like websites or
right.
movies or stuff into your book, because that really dates the story.
It entirely dates it. Netflix is
Just
not
just,
going to be
just
around
make up,
forever.
yeah, either don't name it or make up like a fictional equivalent where everyone gets what you're talking about. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you want to go get a hamburger at Macduff? You know, we know that you're talking about McDonald's, but you're not going to date the book that way.
Yeah, but nope, they're just they're so obsessed with being on trend that they seem to forget that trends end. Trends die.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Dickens wasn't
it's
Dickens wasn't going for relevance. He was going for significance.
exactly. And you know, that's why a lot of these stories have endured. You think that these are the only stories ever written? Of course not. Not even in that time period, these weren't the only stories written. But the reason that they survived, the reason that everybody knows them, is because of how impactful they are and because they speak to the human condition, to the soul, not to the trend or the relevance or what's popular at the time. So yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to
But
her, but Charles Dickens will endure a lot longer than even a more modern writer like Sarah J. Maas and her softcore porn fantasy
yeah,
books.
let's oh my gosh, let's just not go there. Just blah.
I recommend that for the next book club. No,
You're booted. You're gonna get a cupcake thrown at your face.
I would understand.
But yes,
You could
so
you could mail the cupcake to me in Sweden, and I will have one of my family members throw it at me.
there we go. I like it. So yeah, all in all, overall, I would have to give I would have to give I mean, I can't really rate this book because it is so unique and it is very much its own story. And of course it's Dickens, so like it you can't it's you can't if I give this thing anything lower than an 8, people are going to know I'm lying or I'm stupid. But honestly, this book, I don't think it's the only thing that detracts from it for me at all. Is, and again, this is just a style thing, is
Yeah.
Dickens, it can be said in 5 words and Dickens will say it in 15. Like he does not, brevity is not Dickens. Dickens was not about the brevity. And for that reason, I would give this, I would give A Tale of Two Cities a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
But it is otherwise, you know, a timeless story. It's incredibly relevant to today for sure. And it's so impactful, and you root for these characters and you cheer for certain characters' demise, even though you understand where they're coming from. You recognize the evil that has wormed its way into their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, yeah, that would be my score. Raj, what would you rate
I'd give it, 8.5, 9.
Okay.
It's a big story.
It is a big story. Cybot, what about you?
Like you said, just the fact that it has Dickens' name attached to it at least brings him over. Like that alone crosses like 5 out of 10 points. I would give it another point for being just being well done. I would give it yet another point for, like you said, being relevant. Always, I think this is always going to be relevant, whether or not we see like this was relevant 50 years ago, 100 years ago, still, and it's probably going to be relevant 50 years in the future.
Yep. Timeless.
The characters are very well made. The thing about Charles Dickens is that basically all characters represent a concept or something larger than just a name on the page. That's not always easy to do, but he does it really well. The only reason I would detract from it would be purely style based and preference based, like you said. Sometimes it is a minus when maybe readers like me and Raj and maybe others have to like go back and reread a paragraph just to understand. Like I said, I get it. I get the impression that's just him kind of like getting quote unquote carried away, but I get it. And also just a subtract because it's just not what I typically read, but that is purely a subjective style thing. So I would say 8.5 as well, edging closer to 9, but that's about it.
Hey, I completely understand and appreciate where that's coming from. Oh no, Chris Persia, you're fine. Thank you so much for this. We'll talk to you soon. Before you, I don't know if you've already bounced, Chris, but because this was from 2 minutes ago. But chat, if you want to leave, leave what you thought of the book, if you've given a chance, if you've gotten to read it yet. If not, strongly recommend you do. And please read next month's novel. And if you guys become grave masters, and there will be certain there will be book clubs that'll be open to all members to come on the panel as well. And we can all sort of discuss amongst ourselves then. So we will have certain ones like that. Specifically, if any of you saw my this previous Thursday's Nostalgic Nirvana, and we had discussed Uncommon Valor. Well, Lance Nielsen was on with me, and he has offered to, if we read his book, which I am all for, even though there's 2 books, and he's got to write the third one yet. And I know that, remember, I said there would be few exceptions, but because of Lance, his channel is The Outcasts Creative. He does it with a few other people. Like, he's the core main owner of the channel, but he works with other screenwriters and authors and people in Hollywood. Like, that's why they're the outcasts, because they didn't buy into this mainstream narrative, essentially.
They're the untouchables now.
Yeah, basically. So now, but he has written a story, and he has offered to give everybody in the book club the link to the free Kindle version. If you want the actual physical copy, you'd still have to pay for it, obviously, but that would probably in not next month, obviously, but in a few months, because I still have to work logistics with him. But that would be something that I would want everybody on board with, and we could all sort of give feedback and what we thought of the story as a whole and everything like that. And I would read it first before I give it to all of you guys, just so we can essentially, I have an idea and I can sort of prepare you guys for what you're about to read, essentially. But next month, for what we're going to read is another really well-known book that I found out most people have actually not read. They are aware of it, they know the gist of the story, and they know the characters, but they've actually not read the book. And it's a book that my grandfather actually would read to me, and it's, I don't know, it's one of my favorite stories, and it's actually considered a children's book, But when I went back and reread it, I was like, huh, it's definitely not a third grade reading level anymore. And based on some stuff that we had touched on it like previously, but this book used to be considered a third grade reading level, and now it's like a 9th or 10th grade reading level, which is just surprising to me because I was being read this story when I was like in kindergarten. So what we're going to read for next month is Treasure Island.
Oh, excellent.
Ooh.
By Robert Louis Stevenson. And it is such a good story, you guys. We get more of sort of like there's redemption arcs happening. We have greed, we have loyalty, we have deception, revenge. Ultimately deciding what kind of person you are, who you want to be, adventure, pirates. There's freaking pirates. Like, I mean, this is a fantastic story. It's so wonderful, and it's definitely one of my favorites.
I think I have vague memories of reading this one,
Mhm.
and I have definitely seen at least 3 of the many adaptations of it.
Yes,
No, I've seen 4 of the adaptations.
Oh, that doesn't surprise
Jesus
me.
Christ.
There's
I've seen like
But
I've seen
this is a
2
good thing because there are movie alternatives that
Yeah.
one can watch before actually
Yes.
reading the book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like we had
And-
talked about, if you guys are sort of familiar with the story, but again, and I think if you two have read this book, or if anybody's read this book, it's the pacing is really great, but it's very different from anything that is read in today's consumer market.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
It's
So
really good.
I'm really looking forward to it. I hope
Literally my favorite adaptation of this is literally Treasure Planet.
Treasure Planet. I love that
Yeah.
adaptation.
Very,
Wow.
very underrated.
Yes.
Disney made that one, right?
Yeah, Disney made that one, and
Back when they
normally
knew how to tell a good father-son story.
When
Yeah.
they were good. Yeah.
But oh man, the dynamics in this, that's like, yes, the I think that what this story does so well is it shows how important fathers are,
Mhm.
and how much children thirst for a father figure, a pillar of strength and authority and dedication that they can count on and that they can rely on. Is truly something fantastic. So yes, next month we will be reading Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. So I greatly appreciate everybody who was in the chat. You guys are amazing. You got Cybot, Raj. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and discussing this with me and being a part of this. It made a world of difference, and this is really what I love about book clubs, because we got to talk about so much of the book and how fantastic it is, but also just the parallels that it has from being a great story in the real world. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thank you for coming. Hopefully you guys can make it next month as well. So we will be shooting for July is a longer month, but we are going to go ahead and shoot for July 23rd. So it will be the second to last Saturday of the month, because the last Saturday is July 30th. But we're going to go for July 23rd, same time, 2:30 p.m. Central, 3:30 Eastern, 1:30 Mountain. I'm not about to break down all the time zones. Hopefully that you can figure it out based off one of those. But so July 23rd, and we're going to discuss Treasure Island. But that gives you 4 weeks to read the story, and if you need to, like Raj, like we pointed out, if you need to have that pre-cognitive experience, like if you need to watch a movie about it beforehand to kind of help understand what's going on or who the characters are, by all means, go right ahead.
I'm totally gonna watch the movie if I can
There-
find it.
Yeah.
There you go.
You have a lot of options because
There's
I
a
looked it
lot.
up and there are a lot of
Yeah.
adaptations of this.
There are many adaptations of Treasure Island. So,
Impressively,
you know,
most of them are really faithful as well. It's kind
yeah,
of weird.
it's great to see. Like, back when people had integrity when it came to art and source material. But yeah, so we're that's what we're going to cover next month. I appreciate everybody being here. You've all been absolutely fantastic. Just a reminder, these streams, when they happen, are for members only, but then they will be made public afterwards. So hopefully other people can watch this, get an idea, and go read A Tale of Two Cities, but then also maybe prep and read Treasure Island for next month. So this has been fantastic. It went better than I could have ever hoped for or imagined. And I genuinely appreciate every single one of you for being here, for being in the chat, Saiba and Raj for coming on the panel and talking about the book with me. And I much love to every single one of you guys. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I have a Sailor Moon stream in about 3 hours with Lethal Lightning. And we're going to talk about Sailor Moon. So I have another live stream, but that one's not private. That one you can just get prepped for if you want to watch it. But thank you, everybody, for being here, and happy reading. So,
Thanks, Lady G.
of course. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.